So after a somewhat disappointing weekend racing, Monday morning we had plenty of work to do and a lot of different issues that we need to figure out how to improve on. Unfortunately, both the S10 and the Falcon have got some pretty major problems, and getting those two cars lined out is far more important than working on my Malibu right now. Initially, Billy felt that the converter was wrong in the truck, and the Falcon won't even start. So we decided to tackle the most difficult problem first, which is troubleshooting why the Falcon will not start. It's not getting any fuel, so Billy tore the fuel pump all apart. Jeremy went over it with him, couldn't find anything wrong there. So it looks like they're going to have to dig a little deeper underneath this Falcon to figure it out. So I decided to hop into Malibu and head into Jegs to go see Uncle Terry for a few minutes, because I got a few little problems of my own that I need to deal with that crept up this weekend with the Malibu. As long as the Malibu's cruising up the highway, I don't have any problems. But after getting stuck in traffic for 30 minutes, switching race spots 3 times, and quite a bit of round-robin racing, the Malibu was struggling to keep its cool. So Terry ordered me in a new radiator, and I wanted to get this nitrous bottle pressure gauge hooked up so that I don't lose track of my bottle pressure anymore, like what happened at Edgewater on Friday night. So I got all that stuff handled, and I picked up some nitrous jets for Billy's nitrous plate on his Mustang, and then I headed home into some rain that got heavier and heavier. The last 10 miles of my trip home was pretty difficult on those drag radials. Anyway, I made it home, and then I found out Uncle Bucko had solved the mystery of why the Falcon wouldn't start. The boys had managed to diagnose the problem as a fueling issue Friday night. Initially, the fuel pump and the fuel pump cable were suspect. They spent quite a bit of time out there trying to figure this thing out, but sometimes it's just a little bit easier to figure things out once you get it back to the shop. So after Jeremy figured out the fuel pump wasn't the issue, he started looking for an injector pulse signal from the ECU to fire the fuel injectors. So he hooked up some diagnostic tools and got acquainted with the roll cage in the Falcon.
Oh, God. Shit.
No injector pulse.
So, this little 30 amp fuse right here, that's the one.
Well, it runs.
So now we know why the fuel injectors weren't firing, but we still don't yet know what caused the fuse to burn out. Now, random blown fuses can be very difficult to troubleshoot and diagnose. However, the blood trail the Falcon's leaving behind is a major clue. We'll probably dig into that tomorrow, but for tonight we're going to go ahead and bring the Mustang in and do a little work on it. As you've probably already seen on Street Racing Channel, Mr. Kenny Powers put it on that Mustang pretty good, and Billy's feeling some kind of way after Kenny gave him the hit and still drove around him in the 8th. So needless to say, Billy's got some work that he wants to get done on this Mustang, and we went over our options Monday night. Tuesday morning, it was the Malibu's turn to get brought in the shop, dried off, and cleaned up. Now, I had just detailed this car just last week, but after I got caught in the rain, this thing's quite a mess. So once I got the car dried off, I put it up on the lift, cleaned up the wheels and tires, and prepared to start a new project. All right, everybody, so we're back out here in the shop this morning. I got the old Malibu all cleaned up. It's time to let the car back down. I want to get started putting this nitrous bottle pressure gauge in the car. And I wanted to explain a couple things to you guys. And you'll see later in this week some racing that I got into with the boys. And there was some round robin action where I was racing and taking grudge races in the Malibu. And here's the thing, guys, it was pretty hot that day. It was like 86 or 87 degrees, very warm. And even though the car is on E85, when you start round robin racing this thing, it's hard to keep the temperature down, even on E85. And the problem with street racing in a shootout like this is if you go any rounds and you start taking grudge races and you hot lap it, you heat soak it, and you can't get the heat out of it, if you have to go back up and run the semifinal or the final or another grudge race or whatever, sometimes you don't have time to cool down. Sometimes you got to go to a different spot, and sometimes you got to drive to a different spot, and you've only got so many minutes to get the race off, or maybe you end up in a left-hand lane and you have to back off the lane 3 or 4 times to let traffic through. I mean, anything and everything can happen out on the street. So you got to be prepared. You got to be able to keep this thing cool. You got to keep the engine cool enough to where you can put the power to it without butting the ring gaps together. Now, on nitrous or even turbos, intake air temperatures on turbos and on nitrous is basically just the block temperature. But if you have the engine tuned to say run at 160 or 170 degrees, and your ignition timing and your nitrous ramp and your nitrous jetting and everything is all specifically tuned to run at a certain temperature, generally 180 degrees or less, and you go back up and run the final and the thing's 210 degrees, your ignition timing is going to be a little bit too high. You can have problems with butting the ring gaps together on the pistons, because the hotter the cylinder walls are and the warmer the block is, the tighter that ring gap's going to get. And if you're sitting on the edge of your nitrous tune-up and you run up there to run one more race, the final or the semifinal or a grudge race, and it's hot and you pour that power to it, there's a real good chance that you can butt the ring gap together, break a piston, and blow the engine up. So I know from past experience with racing with the kids, there's always that situation where you get pinned down, where you got to make a pass and you're hot, you don't have a lot of time to cool down. If you're on the edge of that tune-up and you're hot, there's a real good chance you're going to have a bad day. So I went to Jegs yesterday, like I mentioned, and talked to Uncle Terry and ordered in an aluminum radiator with a couple of fans. That should be in tomorrow. So maybe later this week I'll get into that. But today I want to go ahead and get this nitrous bottle pressure gauge put in the car so I can monitor bottle pressure and keep my eye on things, because as you up the jet, they use nitrous faster. You don't get as many runs out of a bottle, and that's kind of what stung me down there at Edgewater the other night. I really didn't think that the larger jet would make that big of a difference, but I'm also bad about leaving the bottle open and forgetting to turn it off. And no matter what you do, there's always a small leak in a system. And after 2 or 3 days leaving the bottle open, it'll be empty regardless, at least in my car. So let's get this thing set down on the ground. Let's go ahead and get this nitrous bottle pressure gauge installed. All right, so the first thing we're going to do is go ahead and install the pressure sending unit into this T-fitting, this inline dash 4 fitting. Now, one thing you want to be careful of is when you're putting these fittings together, you want to make sure that you don't get any Teflon tape or any thread sealant anywhere near the passageway where the nitrous flows through. If you get any of that Teflon thread tape or anything like that up in a nitrous plunger, you're going to have a bad day. The first thing we're going to do is make sure the bottle's shut off, and it is, because you definitely don't want to pull a nitrous line off with bottle pressure against it. So once I made sure that the bottle was turned off and the line was free of any pressure, I went ahead and installed this T-fitting and the pressure sending unit right next to the nitrous solenoid under the hood. Then I reopened the bottle and checked for leaks. Then it was time to start figuring out where I'm going to mount the gauge and run the wiring. And that was about the time that Kenny showed up to work today to help me with that. Instead of drilling a major hole in the firewall, Kenny went ahead and cut the wires, twisted them together, and then pulled them through the firewall through an existing rubber grommet for the speedometer cable. Once he had the wires pulled through the firewall, all he had to do was attach the wires back together and run the red wire to the key ignition switch and the black wire to ground. It's a pretty simple installation, really, and Kenny knocked the wiring out in about 20 minutes. The gauge turns on automatically when you turn the ignition on. And after setting in the air conditioning all night, the bottle pressure was down about 730 psi. So I turned on the bottle warmer and sat in the car with June Pup to see how quickly the bottle pressure would come up. It took about 15 minutes, and then once the bottle hit 960 psi, the bottle warmer shuts itself off automatically. So now that we've got that taken care of, I decided it was time to go ahead and change the oil, transmission fluid, and the gear oil in the new Mosier 9-inch rear end while we had the car on the lift and the time to do it. A quick call down to Mark's, and A1 Auto Parts brought us everything we needed to service the rear end and the transmission. I use standard 85W140 Valvoline gear oil in the rear end, Wolf's Head synthetic transmission fluid in the transmission, Penn grade 20W50 motor oil, and Wix Racing filters on all our engines. Once we topped off all the fluids, I fired the Malibu up and let it warm up to check the oil pressure, and Kenny checked the transmission fluid level in the 700 R4. Then it was time for me and June Pup to take it around the block for a test drive. Now, since I've never had a bottle pressure gauge inside the car to see what my bottle pressure is, I've always just banged it through the motor and tried to see if I could feel how high the bottle pressure was. According to what I saw today on the gauge, I've been running the bottle pressure quite a bit lower than I thought, because at 960 PSI, this thing hits like a ton of bricks. So anyway, now that we've got the Malibu all serviced and taken care of, it's time to bring the Falcon back in the shop, put it up on the lift, and investigate why it leaves this blood trail of transmission fluid behind it every time you put it in gear and go to move it. And it just so happens that the blood trail may have led us to the problem that caused the fuse to blow. So what'd you find there, Uncle Rob?
So I found a broke sensor here, and the power wire from the sensor was against the case here, and it was still plugged in. There's a possibility that this could have grounded out against that case, and that could have caused our problem and blow the fuse. Because this line, this was zip tied to this line, and this line came loose, which we had that happen out in the streets of Mexico a couple weeks ago. It came loose and we tightened it up as good as we could get it.
Right.
With what we had out there, it hadn't been leaking, so we weren't worried about it. But it came loose again, and this was hooked right around there. So I'm thinking it pulled on that sensor and it might have grounded out. And depending on where that goes on the inputs and outputs of the way the car's wired, it could have caused our fuse to blow because it shorted itself out basically. So hopefully that's our problem. We'll see, I guess. I'm getting ready to tighten everything up, clean everything off.
So while Robbie's out in the garage working on this electrical problem, I go in to see Vicky for a few minutes and tell her happy birthday. And Tommy just so happened to be there and brought Vicky a birthday gift. Well, sort of. I guess it's the thought that counts more than what's on the balloon. Thomas,
Cursive. It's like I'm dyslexic.
you're blaming it on cursive? Let me see it. What's it say? What's the balloon say, Tommy? Thomas,
Hurry, get a Sharpie.
happy anniversary?
I'm just gonna get the
No,
helium out
don't.
of it.
Oh, you're gonna suck the helium. Well, let's get some use out of it.
Right.
Just a little hole.
Hello?
Sing me.
Is it working?
Sing it.
Happy anniversary.
Is that healthy? I can't be healthy.
Happy birthday to you.
As it turns out, the balloon wasn't the only mistake Tommy's made recently. He also managed to strip out the drain plug on the transmission.
Was this thing guaranteed not to leak?
So Jeremy made repairs to the transmission oil pan as needed. We put a few quarts of transmission fluid in it and then pulled the dipstick out to check the fluid level with the engine running. So once that all checked out okay, there were no leaks, and now we feel like the Falcon is back to being 100% again. Now all we gotta do is figure out what in the heck is wrong with the S10. Now initially Billy thought that maybe the converter was wrong in it when he was down at Edgewater Friday night. But it turns out there was a telltale sign on the dashboard during this pass. The air-fuel ratio was reading extremely rich compared to what it normally is. So we went looking for boost leaks, and it didn't take us long to find a major one. As it turns out, the carb hat was just a little bit loose, causing a boost leak at the top of the carburetor. As it turns out, the truck was only on 23 pounds of boost with an overly rich air-fuel ratio, which is what caused the truck to be so slow.
Well, 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 look at you.
Look at this.
What do you got there, a long sleeve shirt?
Long sleeve t-shirt. There's getting to be a chill in the air in the evenings now, but not everybody wants a hoodie. Sometimes you don't want your hair all bunched up in a hoodie.
So it's your birthday.
It is.
How old are you today, 39?
Oh,
You look good for 50, woman. That's what I'm saying.
thank you. Anyway, these are going to be live on the website now, so
Tonight?
yeah, I'm going to put them on there. They are arriving this week. They're very comfortable. They're very comfortable. Yes.
So what's our plans for tonight?
Well, are you going to take me out to dinner?
If you guessed Cracker Barrel, you were wrong. Cracker Barrel's only for Sundays for pot roast. On her birthday, it's always Cheesecake Factory. So for her 50th birthday, Billy and I took Vicky to Cheesecake Factory for dinner. And she got her favorite thing, meatloaf. All right, everybody, welcome back to the shop. We went in and had dinner tonight. We went to Cheesecake Factory for Vicky's 50th birthday. That was really nice. Billy went with us. Tommy couldn't go. He had to work on the dart with Allison tonight. So he had dropped off birthday presents earlier. Anyway, we had a really nice night, and I went in to see my dad tonight. He's had open heart surgery. He had surgery yesterday. He was in recovery today. He's doing pretty good. He's sitting up in the chair. He's awake. He's talking, and he's flirting with nurses. So he seems to be doing pretty good. We took him a Diet Coke tonight. He was wanting a Diet Coke, so we took him something to drink, and the nurses said it was fine. They wanted him to burp a little bit, so that definitely got him burping, but he's in quite a bit of pain. I did get a chance to talk to Dad for a few minutes tonight, and I had some good news for him, in that I finally got a camshaft in for the 55 Chevy. Iski has sent us a hydraulic roller camshaft for the 327 that I'm putting together for the 55 Chevy that's sitting out back. And while I was in there, I took the opportunity to go over a few details with Mom and Dad about some improvements that I'd like to make to the car. One being power steering, and Dad said he's definitely in favor of that because after this surgery, he's not so sure he's going to have the strength to maneuver that car without power steering. The other thing is power brakes. We're going to go ahead and put power brakes on it. And he also gave me the okay to put air conditioning on it. So the idea is to make the 55 much more enjoyable to drive and cruise around in. So that project is going to get fired up very shortly. I've got the camshaft here now. I've got everything I need to put the engine together. I picked up the heads from Bob a few weeks ago. There's a set of aluminum Edelbrock cylinder heads over here. So I'm going to be on the hunt for some parts here pretty soon. I understand there's a few different companies that offer power steering kits for 55 Chevy. I'm going to look at my options and go from there. In other news, I think the birthday girl's in here and she's wanting to talk about details for a few minutes. So let's go see Miss Vicky. All right, what you got, Squirrely?
So we're headed to Longs, South Carolina.
Now listen, before we dig into this,
What?
we need to have a disclaimer
Yes.
because you feel terribly guilty that you gave details like you're always wanting to do this, and we do.
I know.
We want to give
People
details.
want to know where we're headed.
Right.
And I like to tell them where we're headed.
But it's always
Weather and race vehicle dependent.
yes. There's always a chance that something could go wrong.
And it
And
sometimes does.
Sometimes it does. And this last weekend, we were planning on going to KD, and we didn't get to go because the Falcon broke down and the truck
Friday
wasn't
night.
right. And
So then Saturday, we didn't make it. And then none of us had service at Edgewater to tell anybody that we couldn't. Yeah, so.
thanks to T-Mobile's crappy service, which I'm going to deal with that here very shortly.
But anyway.
All right.
So just be cautious that we are watching the weather. We're going to say where we're headed, but we are watching the weather. It could change. And we try to keep, Facebook as updated as we can with where we're headed to. So.
New shirts.
Wait, I'm not done.
Oh.
I got to say, the name of the drag strip is called North Myrtle Beach Dragway. And it's in Longs, South Carolina. It's going to be a really big event, and BJ is on the light.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know that.
Yep.
All right.
That's always fun. I love watching him do the light. So
Yeah.
anyway, it's going to be fun. It's going to be sketchy, just like the boys like. So it should be a good time. We will have merch. We're dragging all that stuff
Oh, for the love.
for the 10-hour drive. So,
A reminder.
yeah, you gotta let me process all this.
Oh my God.
It's Saturday, and the gates for spectators open at 11, and the chip draw's at 3, and then they're gonna be racing after they get the cars paired. So, okay, now you can talk.
I forgot what I was going to say now. You got to let me
Well,
process
you were
it.
interrupting about my shirt.
I was just going to go over that.
Yeah, look at it.
I know, it looks good.
It's very comfortable.
You look pretty in it.
Thank you. I like having something that's warm but not hot, and it's not, it's nice to have something in between for this kind of fall weather
Yeah.
that we're heading into, so.
I'm trying to remember what in the heck I was going to say. You interrupted me.
You were probably going to say, honey, it's your birthday, and I've got this present that I forgot to give you, right? Crickets.
I took you to dinner. I took you to freaking Cracker Snarl, wherever that place is. What is it?
Cheesecake Factory.
Yeah, that's it.
Cracker Snarl. I'm tired. It's midnight. Actually, it's 12:15. I gotta get to bed.
All right.
Bye. I just remembered. For people who want more details, go to Facebook and search Battle of the Beach. Battle at the Beach. That's the name of the Facebook event page.
Okay, is that it?
Yeah.
Are we done now?
Yeah. Yeah, it's $20 for spectators. Kids 12 and under are free.
Now are we done?
Are they running this frontwards or backwards?
It's front side.
Front side, but BJ's on the light. Warrior and Puddle. I wasn't very prepared. Battle at the Beach.
50 years old. You're practically an Alzheimer's patient.
Shh.
I think just need to put some come along, some chains, maybe some ratchet straps, 4 corners.
Just tie it down real tight, huh?
Real tight.
Just go under the intake in the middle.
Yep.
And then do a ratchet strap over it and just get it real tight.
Big glob of silicone right here. Put the strap over it.
There you go.
Done.
Is it about time for you to get a haircut?
No, but I gotta go feed goats and. You're right. I need to go do that.
You need to shave like me. They think you're daddy. Uncle Bucko.
Rob, you're on a short leash.
I can see Rob's head on a goat.
What was that? What was that dude from Saturday Night
I'll
Live?
kick you in the nuts.
Goat boy from Saturday Night Live. You just out here, you walk around. Yanni, Yanni. Jim Brewer, that's who it was on Saturday Night Live. Yanni. That dude was on the head.
Yeah, it was. Now there is no more Saturday night.
There isn't.
There's not. You can watch it, but it's like watching a dead goat.